Pat, when I sized up Penn State against Notre Dame, it seemed like I was looking at two teams and just facing them in a mirror, except that Drew Aller is the prototypical NFL prospect, and Riley Leonard's more of a baller, just run, do whatever you need to do, not an accomplished or skilled passer that we expect to see at the next level. But otherwise, they look like the same team. Now, Riley Leonard ended up having a really good passing game, and Drew Aller did not. So he outpassed the future NFL player. Now, looking at Ohio State and Notre Dame, again, all three layers of the defense, beat up offensive lines that have persevered and survived and done as well as you could expect. But the explosiveness of the offense on the Ohio State side seems to be the determining factor of an 8 or 9 point favorite.
Yeah, I saw somebody say on social media the other day, and I forget who it was, so forgive me, but if Riley Leonard throws for 90 yards like he did against Georgia, Ohio State wins by, running away with it. And I think that's probably accurate. I think you need to make plays offensively if you're Notre Dame. And I also heard somebody say if you take out the big 98-yard run from the Indiana game, Notre Dame's averaging like 3 yards per carry in this. Now I haven't gotten into the nitty gritty of Notre Dame, but I do feel like I've seen a good amount of them in this playoff and sort of throughout the season. The maybe they don't have the explosive playmakers. You just look at the statistics. Their wide receivers, they don't have the huge numbers that a Jeremiah Smith or a Emeka Egbuka have put up this year. But I think there's still opportunities there, right? I mean, you don't get this far without guys being able to make plays. And yes, they've leaned on that defense. They've leaned on Riley Leonard, and his ability to run the ball and be kind of that rugged quarterback, kind of what I thought Will Howard might have to be at some point, but we've never seen that really materialize. And when he did run on Friday night, he fell down pretty easily after 18 yards, which was a big joke in the post game, kind of giving Will Howard some stick. But I mean, I think if you just look, if you took the 247, I haven't looked at this, but if you took the 247 Sports talent composite, I think Ohio State probably is pretty heavily favored just based on that. Obviously, Vegas believes that. But I think that there's a reason Notre Dame's here. And I think while, I'm early on thinking I will pick Ohio State to win, I think you still have to give credit to the opponent. And I do think that Notre Dame has some things that could cause Ohio State some issues. If they're able to get Love going on the ground the way he was during the season, that opens a lot of things up, right? And, Ohio State's been really good against the run this year. Even throughout the playoff, facing some pretty good running backs, though a couple of them have been dinged up. So, I think that's Notre Dame's best bet is if you can establish that run game, whether it be the quarterback or the running back, and then maybe that opens things up. Kind of the opposite of what I think Ohio State needs to do or what Ohio State has done in the Tennessee and Oregon game is, get the ball on the perimeter, get it to those guys, make Notre Dame defend the whole field, and then you can hit some of those runs that you want to do. The counter play has worked really well for Ohio State in the postseason. So I think it's an interesting like battle of styles. Marcus Freeman's approach is similar to like a Jim Tressel. Talking from an Ohio State perspective, they're going to play really good defense. They can make some plays on special teams. They don't make a lot of mistakes. I think on the other side, Ohio State also plays really good defense, but isn't as good on special teams. So maybe that's a thing to look at. And then, there have been some mistakes by Will Howard. Travion Henderson with that penalty and again, it was uncharacteristic, but it happened. So things like that maybe Notre Dame could capitalize on.
Pat, to put the matchup breakdown that we're involved in right now, and to run back to the beginning of the conversation about Jack Sawyer, this defensive front from the inside out, the two ends, they get all the notoriety, but the inside guys as well, Tyleik Williams, first and foremost, I don't know how they can play any better. And we're talking about a unit that, we can nitpick. And with Ohio State, that's often the deal. But it was the number one rated defense in the country, both in yards per game and also points per game. But they have stepped it up considerably in the postseason, and I don't know how they can play much better.
Yeah, I think you just have to play the same, right? Like, and that's kind of what Ryan Day has talked about, kind of all through the playoff is, what happened in the last game doesn't matter. We've got to bring it, through the preparation. And then obviously once you step on the field. So it's just that consistency of doing your job throughout the week. And then each play you're on the field. And I think Ohio State's done a really good job with that. I don't think it needs to be elevated if we're talking the defensive line, even just the defense in general. I think that they've shown such a high level of play, as you mentioned, that if you can do what has gotten you here, to use the term we said earlier, then I think you're in a pretty good spot. I think Ohio State would take that against anybody in this field that we had, with the way the defense has been playing, and that's led up front by the defensive line.
Disputed National Champions, folks. That's the book. Please check it out. It's 100 pages, getting a lot of great reviews. For this one, the link is in the description section down below. Not just a history book, it's actually a historical reset, and we propel it toward the present day format. So an interesting read there for you junkies. Marcus Freeman actually played linebacker for Ohio State. A lot of people listening to us right now, especially fringe college football fans or fans of other teams that then focus on the two teams in the national championship, may not know that. And he wasn't just a hanger-on or special teams guy. Prominent player, all Big Ten kind of player for some really good teams. I know he wants to separate himself from his past. And even before a matchup with Ohio State, of course, he's coached the 2 games in the regular season. And, he wants to identify himself as the Notre Dame coach, and it's all Notre Dame, but, ties to the school that you not only graduated from, but played football at an extremely high level. And I believe also met his wife at Ohio State University. Those ties are pretty deep.
Yeah, absolutely. He's born in Ohio, Fairborn, Ohio. He was a 2-time second team All Big Ten linebacker, as you mentioned. Pulled up his stats here. 264 total tackles, 23 tackles for loss, 6 sacks, 2 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles. So pretty good numbers. I remember those defenses well. The guy that he played next to in those the Ohio State's defense, James Laurinaitis, who worked for him at Notre Dame, is now the linebackers coach at Ohio State. I tried to get James Laurinaitis in the locker room after the game. He was on a phone call the entire time, which may have been intentional, so as to not have to talk, because obviously these questions are coming at some point or another before this game. But yeah, Marcus Freeman certainly downplayed it. And I think having played those 2 games against Ohio State, obviously not at this stage of the season and the College Football Playoff National Championship game, but I think that helps. It's easier for him to steer the narrative away, right? Because I remember before the game that was played in Columbus a few seasons ago, that he did open up a little bit about it and talk about what Ohio State has meant to him and things like that. So I feel like he feels like he's already done that, but it's still there. And, when especially for a game like this, you're going to get the national reporters who maybe, we're definitely paying attention when Ohio State played Notre Dame, those two in 2023 and 2024, or 2022 and 2023, but maybe weren't as dialed in. And so those questions are going to come for him this whole week leading up to the game. And he can steer it away, but it's certainly a big part of his past. He's a guy who, there are some Buckeye fans out there, when they get mad at Ryan Day, that's a guy they point to as a guy who, maybe would be a good replacement. And look, if things don't go Ohio State's way next Monday, rest assured, I imagine Marcus Freeman's name will come up on social media or message boards from the people who still don't believe in Ryan Day if he goes 0-2 in national championship games. So there's a reason for that. His ties to Ohio State. He understands this program, and it'll definitely be a talking point, like I said.
So to extend on that, Pat, of course, we've got the players that played in those games.
Yeah.
The first one was a pretty business-like Ohio State wear them down in the second half, 21-10 win with C.J. Stroud at the controls. And then, of course, Kyle McCord led a last-minute drive. And then we had the epic close with the 10 players on the field for Notre Dame and 1 second left. And Chip Tranum with the game winner, and Ohio State pulls out a miracle at the end. But especially on the Ohio State side, and like you, I watched Notre Dame fairly good rate during the regular season, but I've watched all the playoff games, and you see how much of a veteran unit they have pretty much on both sides of the ball. So there are a ton of players, more so than we will become accustomed to in college football in the future, with these guys jumping all over the place, but guys that have stuck around for these programs. So a lot of guys have played in these two football games.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting how that gets used as motivation around Notre Dame. I know Jeremiah Love, the running back, was quoted as saying that, we won Ohio State, basing it off of what happened last season. Marcus Freeman was asked about that in the Zoom call we had with him. And he again sort of downplayed, this is a different year. These are different players, things like that. Some Ohio State players were even asked about it in the locker room after the game. And that was kind of the response as well, is they are, a different team than they were when we played them in those two games. But I think you definitely are aware that this just happened, right? It's the same as the start of next season when Ohio State hosts Texas. This game that just happened is going to come up, right? Even though you're going to have a lot of different players, especially on the Ohio State side, but certainly some on Texas too, that weren't in that game. I think you can't avoid that. If this had been Penn State and Ohio State, there would have been a similar story about, they played earlier this season, just like it was before Ohio State played Oregon. And, it's all part of the narrative. Does it affect things? Maybe. I think if Notre Dame, wants to use that, hey, Ohio State just beat us in two games that we felt like we were really in for the most part, so be it. But as you and I were talking, Mark, before the game, and this was basically the message Marcus Freeman said, was like, you shouldn't really need extra motivation going into a national championship game, right? Like, these guys should be on either side of the ball, should be as motivated as they can be. It's not like one of these teams is walking in undefeated and talked about as the best. If this were Oregon going into the national championship game and had heard for weeks and weeks how great they were, sort of like the 2006 Ohio State team that lost to Florida, like maybe then you need try and find some extra motivation. But I think these two teams, they've taken their lumps during the season. Notre Dame, obviously, with the really bad loss to Northern Illinois, and then people just kind of writing them off for a lot of the year. And then Ohio State, obviously, with the loss to Michigan and all that came from that. So I don't think you'll need any extra motivation, but if Notre Dame wants to use it, look, I think anywhere you can find that added motivation, it helps. But again, I think both teams will be plenty motivated.
I've matched up the two teams in regards to common opponents, which would be, of course, Penn State, Indiana, and Purdue, and then also the historical matchup of all the great winning percentage, national championships on down the line of all the metrics, and also 1970 on, 21st century, and the CFP era. Notre Dame fans, you may want to cover your eyes when you go through that video. Pat, appreciate you being here. Glad that you get to cover the national championship game. Certainly an accomplishment in your career. So have a good time. I know that you're going to be grinding the entire time, but try to soak it up and enjoy it at the same time.
Oh yeah, for sure. I try and make sure I take it in a little bit at every game, be it, Bloomington, Indiana, West Lafayette, Indiana, or, down in Atlanta at the at State Farm. Is that what it is? Is that what that stadium is?
Mercedes-Benz.
Mercedes-Benz. That's right. So yes, it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it. And we'll have plenty of coverage. And Mark, thanks for having me on.